an injectable in the morning and then following up with a supplemental sublingual at night. When I went through my last fast where I used NAD plus throughout the fast. Now, for some of that, both before and after, I was just doing the sublingual at 20 milligrams a dose 3 times a day. But for some of the meat of the fast and for a portion of that, I was doing an injectable in the morning and then following up with a supplemental sublingual at night. During that time, I got a lot of complexed NAD plus in my system every single morning, every evening. And what happened with me was I didn't know anything about methylation at that point, so it shows what I know. But what happened is as Yajit pointed out in a post that we're going to get to in just a moment, basically I completely burnt out my ability to methylate because the NAD plus itself was robbing so much of that process from my body that I was low on supplies that would be needed for methylation for other processes in my body. And one of the side effects of that is a buildup of norepinephrine, which is also noradrenaline. And hopefully I will be able to find all the studies that we want to look at here. But let's take a look at Yajit's post first and see what he had to say about this in reaction to my video about that experience. Taking supplemental levels of niacinamide and derivatives can reduce the SAMe pool. This may cause under-methylation issues, especially if the person has SNPs in their genes that are involved in the methylation cycle. So for me, I found out that yes, that certainly applies. I don't know about my genetics per se, but I just know that there was under-methylation. And let's see if he goes on to talk about methylation is the process whereby methyl groups are donated to other molecules. This addition alters the body's chemistry, sometimes activating it and sometimes inactivating it, depending on the chemistry in question. Key substances in the body affected by methylation include DNA, RNA, neurotransmitters, in my case there was some serotonin issues, hormones, neurons, cellular membranes and their signaling mechanisms, immune cells, enzymes, proteins, and many others. So this isn't something we want to sleep on. So I got to thinking about this when Yajit brought this up with me. And my question to him on that post, and I think we kind of miscommunicated a little bit, or we didn't understand he didn't understand where I was going with it, was might the same issue arise when dealing with something like trenbolone or decadurabolin? And I ask this because if you're using a beta blocker, as I was when I last tried decadurabolin years ago, the adrenaline that would normally clear your system is blocked by the beta blocker, okay? And so that adrenaline actually converts in your body to noradrenaline. But what is noradrenaline? Well, noradrenaline is experienced as aggression and keyed up energy, paranoia, all these sorts of things. Perhaps the kind of things that some people feel when they smoke a sativa, for instance. Some people are very prone to that. So norepinephrine is noradrenaline. So it's a very powerful form of adrenaline. And my question to Yajit was, do you think that this is somewhat of what's happening when we have aggression and lack of sleep, night sweats, the whole bit, or maybe even a tightening up when we're on trenbolone? And we didn't really discuss that further. But then today I had a conversation with a fella that pointed something interesting out. He had purchased some of my products and he was asking about, I was explaining about the NAD, and in his particular case, he said that seems like it wouldn't be effective for him. And I explained, maybe some of the different ways. I can't remember, I'd have to look at my text, but I explained some different ways that NAD worked and how it could possibly help. And he shot back with his own method that he's currently using, which is a very minuscule, by industry standards, dose of trenbolone on top of a small dose of TRT, and the combination of the two together has been very tolerable, actually feels good, and doesn't seem to be causing issues. outwardly, but one of the side effects that he's experiencing is weight reduction, fat reduction, and a tightening up of his body. And there's multiple reasons for why this happens. Let's go over a few of the basics with Tren and with NAD. And you can kind of extrapolate some of the stuff about Deca with Tren. Both of them tend to have some of the same aggression producing effects in certain people that are prone. So we're just going to go over how both of these, both Tren and NAD, might lead to greater fat loss. And it's kind of interesting because there are some parallels. Number one, with Trenbolone, nutrient partitioning, okay? And nutrient partitioning is just basically using more of what we want for muscle building, and that kind of robs the nutrition away from our fat. So consequently, more of what we eat goes to muscle, and consequently of that, less of it goes to fat. 2, blunted protein degradation and protein synthesis. As we all know, anabolic androgenic hormones are protein stimulating, but so they're resistant to protein degradation. And that can be a very valuable resource when it comes to accruing muscle over time. Think of the snowball effect. The less muscle you lose, the less you have to gain day by day, month by month, week by week. It accrues. And number 3, a rise in noradrenaline, okay? Which reminds me, let me get into where that might come in with NAD. Okay, with NAD, compared to an anabolic or an androgenic, it's doing something totally different, obviously. But we're going to increase ATP/energy output, okay? This is one of the main things that NAD will help with some of us older guys. It'll actually feed the ATP process that we use. Think about this, creatine feeds that too. And our glycogen is part of that. Our glycogen use during a workout is part of that. So as we have increased ATP, we kick out more glycogen during workouts. And if you're not using something to replenish that glycogen, say, you're going to be very flat trying to use NAD if you're eating a normal carb diet. Number 2, glucose use / burnout, which I just described. So these are the ways that NAD will lead to weight loss. So increased energy efficiency, or not efficiency, but just increased energy output. And then the second way is that glycogen does go out, and some people will perceive that as fat loss when it's really just lost water, lost glycogen, fullness. And some people perceive that as muscle loss, depending on what you're going for. So somebody bulking that takes NAD may misunderstand and think they've lost muscle when really all they've done is kind of flush out what they've had. Number 3, increased noradrenaline. Again, and this is what I wanted to address today with these studies. Well, as this says here, key substances in the body affected by methylation include yada, 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 and we list hormones. But let's just take a quick look, just to ask the question, are steroids, and remember, steroid refers to any steroidal hormone in your body, in this case, so estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, testosterone, Tren, whatever is naturally or unnaturally in your body. So effects of sex steroids, so that would be that type of steroid, on the pattern of methylation and expression of the promoter region of estrogen and androgen receptors in people with gender dysphoria under cross-sex hormone treatment. So let me break this down. Basically what this study is people that are transitioning from male to female and female to male and receiving hormone therapy in order to accomplish this. This is measuring the pattern of methylation within their body as they go through these various treatments. And where the parallel comes in for people that are interested in the gym primarily is that the people that are transitioning from female to male are taking male hormones. And this is just the abstract, unfortunately. But no differences in DNA methylation. Oops, here, so we can see that. Okay. No differences in DNA methylation of ESR were found in male to female, while DNA methylation was increased in female to male at 6 and 12 months of their hormone treatment. Okay? So what that means is as they built up the hormone levels, in this case it would be testosterone or a testosterone derivative, to transition from female to male, there were increase in DNA methylation. Now, is that saying that the hormones themselves caused the extra methylation? I don't think so. What they're saying is there was an extra demand of methylation overall while this was occurring. And one of the consequences of this may not be noradrenaline per se for every individual, but what happens is any kind of under-methylation problem that might arise for a particular individual in a particular way under a particular circumstance, because we're all different, is a possibility when we're doing something that changes our hormonal balance in our body. Okay, so let's look at this next one. A study in mice showed that testosterone administration in neonatal females altered brain DNA methylation 20-fold in adulthood to shift towards a male methylation pattern, whereas short-term effects of testosterone were relatively modest. And all this is saying, in regards to the pertinence of what we're talking about, is that there are major shifts in need for and ways of methylation, and the ways that are, they're talking about molecular changes in the brain and in the DNA, or the effects of steroids on DNA methylation, et cetera, et cetera. So this is no small deal. And anytime we're messing with hormones and we're changing our hormones, we're having some effect on that process. When I was in my early and mid-20s, I used Trenbolone because it was something that was available at that time, and one of the few things that was available to me at that time. And I never really had an excessive amount of trouble on it. I had night sweats, I couldn't sleep. It was fairly miserable, but it was what was expected at that time. Beyond that, I really even never had any trouble with excessive aggression or anything like that, unless I paired it with a high dose of caffeine, and it seemed to set that off. But in general, I managed pretty well, at least in my opinion. Maybe others would say differently. Fast forward many, many years later, and still many years ago, but as I was older, somebody had offered me some Tren for free, and I didn't, never wanted to pass up an opportunity. I thought, oh, sure, why not? And the anxiety, the paranoia, the aggression, and I was just out of control. And I wasn't even taking any kind of large dose at all. So when I was young, as we age, we lose our ability to methylate. We have less raw materials for methylation. Our bodies are actually literally slowing down. That's part of the aging process. And that's to preserve us and for longevity. But at the same time, it leaves us unable to metabolically handle some of the things that we could handle when we were young. And I personally believe that a lot of that is a consequence of under-methylation. And I think that there's not a lot, there's pretty flimsy evidence for me to back that up at this point. But it's just something to think about. In this conversation I had today, of course I'm promoting my NAD+. I had a good experience on it, and I feel like it's very powerful. To this person that I was talking to, it wasn't such a good option. Well, when he told me what he was doing and what was working for him, well, I would agree, because if you add the NAD on top of that, you're probably not going to notice anything. I mean, it's the drive and I'm guessing noradrenaline and norepinephrine that comes with using even a small dose as we get older, especially of Trenbolone, I think would lend itself to a buildup of noradrenaline. The rise in noradrenaline is going to harden us up, is going to burn fat, is going to raise our adrenaline levels. It is adrenaline. And I think that's part of the magic of it, okay? Still possibly not for me, okay? Maybe under different circumstances. Maybe, if I was a more serious competitor or something. But And I'm not laughing at the idea. It's a very valuable tool, and the way that this person is using it is extremely intelligent. And I think what's happened is more than likely, I think this person very reasonably found that sweet spot for them, to where they're having increased drive and burning up some calories and burning some fat, but they're not going overboard to where they feel miserable, to where they're, you ever drank way too much coffee? Or, I'm not one for stimulants outside of coffee, to be honest, but if a person had some stimulants before and just felt that overclocked kind of crazy feeling, I don't like that. So that's probably what this person is avoiding too, is we don't want to live like that, So finding that sweet spot. I'm not recommending anybody else do that. I just found it interesting, because when I go down the rabbit hole, it makes me wonder if there's not some correlation. So the NAD that I sell and make has trimethylglycine as its methyl donor, and I think that's very important. But also, it's very important to support your body with B vitamins, with magnesium. I keep a few other, I keep an injectable B vitamin complex, and a few other methylators around in case I feel that they're needed. I am also on paroxetine, and if it actually, the under-methylation can affect the serotonin levels in your brain. I've shown some studies on that in the last video about this. And so that's something to be aware of too. So there's a lot going on with Tren and its aggressive side effects, with Deca and its aggressive side effects, that has some correlation from under-methylation that I would associate with NAD or another similar product that could lead to a buildup of noradrenaline. I don't want much of a buildup of that, if any, okay? Maybe a little extra aggression in the gym's fine, but other than that, forget about it. I want to live a peaceful life. So that's what you can manage with using methyl donors, okay? So trimethylglycine, B vitamin complex, magnesium. In fact, go back and read this post that Yajit put up. And he actually breaks down several very interesting methyl donors, okay? So it's good to read through the comment sections, folks. And not just for me. But there's some good information in there. That's what I wanted to talk about tonight, and thank you for tuning in. You have a good day.